So the second function of the self is self-control. And what we're basically saying with self-control is this is the ability to kind of override any impulses that you may have that are not either appropriate or good at the time or whatever. So, for an example, when you're in a lecture, so if you're actually in class in front of a professor taking notes, why don't you just talk? Right? How come you're not talking over the professor? And that's because you may want to, but you're overriding yourself. You know what the most um, thing that annoys me the most about self control is when people don't do it when I know they should. Like, for an example, we just did graduation here at Gettysburg College. The faculty sit kind of by the Penn Hall area, and we get to watch people walk across the stage. Well, before people actually get to walk across the stage, there's like an hour to an hour and a half of just traditional ceremony stuff. And we have speakers, and we have all these things that have to get conferred upon people, all these degrees, and it's boring. And there's a lot of stuff going on. But you're not. It's not like you're there for 9 hours. But what drives me nuts is when people just get up and walk out to use the restroom. Like, have some self control and just keep it together. Yes, I'm sorry that you may be bored, but come on, use your self control a little bit. Control yourself. And this is what's called the executive function of the self. All right, the executive function, because we are kind of using the self as a way to, as kind of like the president of your body, if you will. And the president of your body decides whether or not it is appropriate for you to get up and do things or for you to say things. Now, imagine if we didn't have self-control, all right? Imagine if this wasn't the case. Then what we would be is we would be a society of people who are really fat because we would just eat all the time. We have no control over that. We would have sex all the time, anywhere we wanted, and we would hit people all the time. Basically, we would all act like whiny little babies, with the exception of the sex thing. All right. And so this would be, so if we didn't have self-control, it'd be very, 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 very bad. And so it's a good thing we have it. And however, what we have to know about this is that there is good theory behind this. So this is a theory called the self-regulatory resource model. It describes how self-control works. This is a model done by Baumeister. All right, done by Baumeister. And here's what he said. He said that self-control takes energy. All right. It takes effort. It takes cognitive resources to do that. So let me give you an example. If you're in class and you're really hungry, all right, your stomach is growling, you didn't eat breakfast, and you're just like, man, I really need to eat. How come you just don't get up just leave lecture in the middle of it and go grab a snack? Well, we don't do that because we control ourselves, all right? But we need energy to do it. All right, we need energy to do it. What's going to happen here is with this energy is it's limited. This energy is not it's not like our body constantly has energy, and what's going to happen is there's only so much of it that we have to devote. And what happens is when that energy is depleted or something else comes into play, then that energy goes away. So how many people that are listening to this, imagine a case where, how many of you, when you're really tired, like very, very tired, it's close to the end of the day, you've been up for a long time, you're just exhausted, and someone says something to you that you don't like. Think about yourself. You're probably more likely to yell at them because you're super, super tired than not. I can tell you, as a father of 2 kids who had a difficult time sleeping, one of which still does, if I'm super tired because I'm up with them all night long, if my wife is like, Chris, you didn't take out the trash like I told you to, all of a sudden, because I'm super tired, I don't have the energy to control myself, and I will just poof, just like that, go off and be upset and yell. But if I'm well rested and my wife is like, Chris, you didn't take out the trash like I asked you to last night, then I'll be like, oh, my bad, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. Because now I have the ability to control my urges of yelling and work through that. All right, so that's what self-control is all about, and the resource model predicts that. So what we have is we have this energy, but this energy is there, or it's either it's like a gas tank. It's either full or it can go all the way to empty. All right. And what's going to happen is this energy could be spent doing lots of things. It doesn't have to be you're tired. Let me give you an example of me, and you guys can see how it relates to you. So when I was in graduate school, I have to sit there, and I had to take a test. This test was called preliminary exams. It is a all-day test, and basically it's what happens here is that if you fail the test, you get kicked out of graduate school. This happens after you get your master's, before you get your PhD. So before you can even think about your dissertation or your PhD, you actually have to take this test. If you fail it, you're not good enough to make it through the program, so they kick you out. So for me, they gave us a reading list that was about 18 pages long of just citations. And we had to know the ins and outs of every single one of those articles because we could get tested on anything. All right? So I studied for this test for 7 to 8 months straight, every day. Before the test, so the test was in January. So I've been studying since last July. So now it's getting close to January. Guess what? I'm so exhausted and my energy is so spent with this test that I didn't shave for a month. I could barely get myself to shower and I ate like crap because the whole time I was sitting there worried and thinking about and studying for this test. Now think about yourself during finals week. All right. How many of you just look all sorts of disheveled because you no longer care about your appearance when you go take these finals? Instead, you're so focused and you're controlling yourself so much about your finals that all your energy is spent there, and therefore other pieces of your life have to be kind of relaxed, like your appearance, or you're deciding to shower or not. Also, you're going to be more testy and more moody because of these things. All right. Now, so therefore, what he argued, what Baumeister argued, is that the self is like a muscle. What I want you guys to do real quick is I want you to, I know it's weird because you can't see me, but I want you guys to just flex your biceps. So your biceps, the muscle on your arm, just flex it. All right. And what you'll see is that it's easy to do at first, but I want you to keep doing it. And what's going to happen is eventually your arm's going to start to shake. All right. Because you're going to start to get tired. And eventually what's going to happen is your arm's going to start to get sore. Your muscles are going to start to ache. And eventually you just have to stop. And that's exactly what Baumeister argued the self-control is like, is that you can flex it, but eventually it starts to get tired. And you can only flex it so much. Now, we've run into this before. When we talked about the Vose et al. Research Club article. Remember, this is the article where they had people have their self-resources depleted. And if you remember how they did that, it was really neat. What they did is they had people watch a gross movie, and they told people some people who were told to not make any facial expressions whatsoever. So it was this gross movie, and they were told to control their facial expressions. All right. And another group of people were told to watch this gross movie and just watch it. So you can make any facial expression you want. Those who had to control their facial expressions were using that energy. And then sure enough, when they were provoked in this aggression paradigm, they were the ones who were more aggressive. The people who just their energy was gone. They didn't have the ability to control themselves. And so when someone provokes them, they aggress back. But for those people who did have the energy available, guess what? They didn't aggress as likely. So this is an interesting idea, right? The self-control is an interesting idea. We manipulate it in the lab typically by doing like what Vose did, where they show someone a gross video or a scary video and they're told not to make any facial expressions. Another way to do it is to deplete their resources. So I've done something like this in my lab, and what we do is we have people try to memorize a list of like 13 numbers. All right, well, we know 13 is beyond the scope of working memory. And so we have them memorize it. We tell them we're going to test you on this later. And so the people who get 13 letters, they constantly have to be thinking about those 13. They constantly have to be rehearsing it in order to remember it. And that also depletes your resources. All right, so there's lots of ways we can manipulate this in the lab. And what they showed is that if your resources are depleted, then psychologically you behave differently. Now, here's a question for you. If the self is indeed like a muscle, can we train it? Can we go to the metaphorical gym and train the self to have and keep that energy? The answer is yes. There was a study by Galliot and his colleagues. And what he did is he was interested in training self-control. All right? And so what he did is he had people engage in something called self-control training. So some participants got to go home, and they, when they got to their dorm for a week, they had to do things with their non-dominant hand. Little things like brush your teeth, use a cup, make coffee, write. If you're going to do homework, use it with your left hand. And so for a week, they had to do this. Now, this may seem silly, but think about what you're doing when you're doing that. What I want you to do is try doing that. Tonight, when you're going to sleep, try brushing your teeth with your non-dominant hand. And what you'll see is that it is no longer an automatic process. Like for me, I'm right-handed. When I brush my teeth, I know exactly what I'm doing, where I'm going with my toothbrush. And with my right hand, you just do it. You're kind of like on autopilot. But if you do it with your left hand, you actually have to sit and think about it. You have to think about how you're holding the toothbrush and how it's in your mouth and where you're brushing. You have to do these things. You have to put in effort and energy. And by doing this for every simple task, eating, using a cup, brushing your teeth, washing your face, writing with a pencil, all these things, if you do that with your non-dominant hand, you are training yourself to do that. So what Galliot did is he did that. He had some participants do that for a week, and other participants did not do that for a week. Now, what Galliot did then is he brought them back after a week and brought them into their lab. All right? And then what he did is he had them list stereotypes of marginalized groups. So he had participants write down, for example, what do you think, for white participants, what do you think of black people? All right? That's an example of a marginalized group. And what they found, and so one thing we need to know, we'll learn about this later, is that everyone has stereotypes about black people. Everyone does. Everyone has stereotypes about everybody. That's not just black people, but for this study, they talked about black people. So everyone has these stereotypes, but only some of us have the ability to suppress them or control them. And what he found is that what Galliot found is that those who went through the self-control training had less negative stereotype activation about these marginalized groups than those who didn't go through the training. In other words, these people who went through the training were able to better control themselves. Right? And it's because these people went to the metaphorical gym. Galliot's training was like the metaphorical gym that allowed people to work through and train this energy and this muscle so that it constantly was flexing as it needed it. And that's what makes this model really cool. And it further supports the model. All right? And so that's self-control.